Now, a special 2-part edition of 48 Hours.
Four young women. 3 murdered. 1 left to tell the story. The Hollywood Ripper.
He's been called a serial sexual thrill killer.
Hollywood, 2001.
A 22-year-old believed to be actor Ashton Kutcher's girlfriend is stabbed to death.
They were going to be hanging out.
The injuries that she suffered were horrific.
El Monte, California, 2005.
A 32-year-old woman is stabbed in her home.
There was slashing and cutting. There were multiple stab wounds, not just a couple.
Santa Monica, 2008.
A young woman is woken up by a man attacking her with a knife.
She was stabbed multiple times in her chest and shoulder and right arm. She fought. She stood up and she fought.
They were all young, they were all attractive, they were all female.
The media started calling him the Hollywood Ripper. But had he killed others? That was the question investigators more than 1,800 miles away outside Chicago had been wrestling with. It would take a 48 hours investigation to find the answer. Rex, where was Gargiulo's apartment? Outside Chicago, 1993.
The murder happened here in the middle of the night. Someone jumped out of the bushes and stabbed 18-year-old Trisha Picaccio to death.
My daughter Trisha was murdered when she was 18 years old.
I was the one who found her. I woke up and I had a cup of coffee and I was going out to my van. And I just happened to see 2 little tennis shoes sticking up by the side door. And when I saw it was her, I dropped the coffee cup.
Who would do this to her? Why would anybody do this?
She was a nice girl.
I died right then and there.
We were told that we have to understand that some murders go unsolved. And I was like, there is no way somebody is going to come to my door, outside my door, and do this and get away with it.
He's cold. He's devious. He's a predator. And we've got ourselves a serial killer.
They never saw it coming. Trisha, Ashley, Maria, Michelle. The trial of an accused serial killer has dominated the headlines here in Los Angeles. He is known as the Hollywood Ripper.
May it please the court, the methodical and systematic slaughter of women. That's what this case is about.
It is not overstating it to say this is a sensational murder trial.
Ashton.
On the witness list, Ashton Kutcher. He was scheduled to go on a date with one of the victims the night she was murdered.
Ashton Kutcher talked about what would have been his first date with one of the murder victims.
For me, this story begins near my home just outside Chicago.
One question has haunted this quiet Glenview community. Who killed Tricia Piccaccio and why?
The murder of Tricia Piccaccio is a case we've been working on since the summer of 2008. It took years to gain her parents' trust, that maybe somehow by telling Tricia's story, we could help catch her killer. It wasn't long after sunrise on the morning of August 14th, 1993.
I was going out to my van, and when I saw it was her, I ran over there and saw what happened to her.
Rick Piccaccio had just walked out the garage when out of the corner of his eye, he saw his 18-year-old daughter, Tricia, splayed out on the landing, stabbed to death.
I tried to revive her. That is the worst feeling in your life, when you can't do nothing for somebody you love.
I remember just waking up to this blood-curdling scream of my father, and it was, "Doug, call 911, Doug, call 911.
Tricia's brother, Doug.
I don't really want to describe the details of what I saw.
That's okay.
I have nightmares about it all the time.
The police arrived, and Rick had to make a difficult call to his wife, Diane.
He called me at work and said, "You have to come home. Tricia's hurt."
I heard a lady screaming, and the mother had just exited her vehicle, and she was running towards Trish.
Officer Ray Salevich saw her pull up.
I basically tackled her, and I didn't want her to see Trish like this and remember her daughter like that.
Who would do this to her? There is nobody that knew her that would do this to her. My daughter never did anything to put herself in harm's way.
No.
She was the type of girl that you knew where she was, what she was doing, and you never had to worry about her.
Tricia was also the type of girl who made the most of high school. She took calculus, was on the debate team, and played clarinet in the band. At the time of her murder, she was just a few days away from moving on to the next chapter in her young and exciting life as a freshman at Purdue University.
She had a great attitude about everything, and she knew what she wanted out of life.
Were you close with her? Tricia was an amazing girl, was probably one of the most energetic and happy people I've ever seen.
Tricia's close friend Karen Jones spent a lot of time at the Piccaccio house.
Her mom was very caring and treated us all like her children.
Tricia's younger brothers, 17-year-old Doug and 13-year-old Tommy, often had their friends over.
I fed the whole neighborhood. Everybody ate there.
They were just a very warm family.
On the night of August 13th, Karen, Tricia, and most of the kids from their senior class went out. One last hurrah for the summer.
That night, a whole group of us got together for a scavenger hunt party, one of the final parties of the summer before we all went off to college. We ended things at the restaurant, and people started getting in their cars to go home.
Police believe it was around 1 a.m. as Tricia walked toward the side door of the house, keys in hand, that the killer grabbed her left arm, twisting and breaking it, and then stabbing her 12 times.
I remember my chest just sink the minute I realized that she was gone, and there was nothing I could do to help her.
Detectives interviewed dozens of people. Some parents were too afraid to even let their kids talk. No one seemed to know anything. There were no leads, no arrests.
To be honest, I think we were zonked out for a long, long time. People talk about closure. My experience is there is no closure. That void is always there.
Rick Piccaccio also had no idea how to go on living in the same house where he had found the butchered body of his beautiful daughter. The family moved out for 4 years. Eventually, they decided it was time to come back home. Shortly after, they had an unexpected visitor. Former high school football player Michael Gargiulo, one of Doug Piccaccio's closest childhood friends.
Michael, you've known since he was how old?
Since probably he was in 2nd grade, because he lived on the next street. Michael showed up at the door, and he says, I need to talk to Rick. And I said, well, he's at work, Michael. And he said, well, can I wait for him? I said, yes. He sat and waited for over an hour for him to come home from work, sat at my kitchen table.
I remember walking in the garage door, and I looked at him. He had this look on his face like he was going to say something to me.
But before Michael Gargiulo had a chance to say anything,
the garage door opens, his father and one of his sisters come in and say, we have to leave, Michael. And they picked him up and whisked him out, and the door closed. And I told Diane, I says, golly, that was kind of odd. But the look on his face, Maureen.
At that point, Rick, did you think this kid knows something, or maybe he even had something to do with it?
Yes.
You believe that was the moment that you started to think Michael Gargiulo may have had something to do with her death?
No doubt about it.
The Piccaccios told authorities, but it was too late. Michael Gargiulo had disappeared. Soon after he left Chicago, Mike Gargiulo turned up in Los Angeles. Like a lot of other dreamers, he wanted to be an actor or a model. Anthony DiLorenzo and Teamer Leary worked with Mike Gargiulo in the late 90s. They were all bouncers together at a Hollywood nightclub called the Rainbow Bar and Grill. What did he tell you he was doing out here?
Acting and modeling.
Isn't everybody?
Right. Yep.
He was doing the Hollywood thing.
Yeah.
He's doing the Hollywood thing.
Yeah, he sure is.
Did he have a girlfriend at the time when you were all hanging out?
He always had girlfriends.
He always had girls after. He was a good-looking, clean-cut guy. You know, the waitresses were always after him.
But Gargiulo moved on from the nightclub and began working for a heating and cooling company.
Who was the first one among you to meet Michael Gargiulo?
I was.
Chris Duran, Jennifer DeSisto, and Justin Peterson spoke to us in 2010. They were the kind of good friends most young people would be attracted to.
Really, the connection between this big group of friends was kind of partying and having a great time. Very free-spirited lifestyle.
Right.
You were young.
We were young.
Their introduction to Mike Gargiulo started with a flat tire.
I'm changing my flat tire, and this guy comes walking down the street. You know, he was good looking. He stopped and offered to help me change the tire.
At the same time, 22-year-old Ashley Ellerin came out of the house she was renting on the street. Mike Gargiulo noticed.
And Ashley was standing there with me, and he was good looking, and she's beautiful. I was like, no, it's okay, I know how to change a tire. So he stood there talking to Ashley, and they were, you know, talking and flirting. They exchanged numbers, and that was our first meeting.
Did you have any feeling about him one way or the other?
I mean, he was just, you know, a good-looking guy walking down the street offering to help.
Ashley Ellerin, the young woman Mike Gargiulo had immediately noticed, was a part-time fashion student.
She was amazing. I mean, she just had this charisma to her that she could go into a room and walk into the room and just take complete control over the room. And
she was just beautiful and fun and spontaneous.
She had a lot of friends.
Ashley was a 22-year-old, you know, attractive girl living in the Hollywood Hills.
And she liked to have fun?
Absolutely.
She liked to have fun. We had a lot of fun.
The guy they only knew as Mike kept trying to spend time with Ashley.
He called the house a lot after their run-in.
Called and had begun just showing up, uninvited.
Seeing that we were hanging out.
The friends say one night he walked into the house during a party, sat down and was laser focused on Ashley. But Ashley was not interested. Back then, lots of men were interested in her.
Hollywood is Hollywood. Interacting with celebrities, that is how it is. I mean, they live here.
One celebrity in particular had started calling Ashley. It was then up-and-coming TV actor from that 70s show, Ashton Kutcher.
Why
Is everything doing that? We had hung out with him a couple of times.
Let's go back to the night that Ashley was supposed to go out with Ashton Kutcher.
I knew they were going to be hanging out.
The next morning, Ashley's roommate, Jen, came home.
I entered the house, and Ashley was laying across the 2 stairs, covered in blood.
The body of 22-year-old Ashley Lauren Ellerin was found by her roommate early Thursday morning.
And that's when I realized that, no, this is not, this is not happening. Who could have done this?
When Jennifer DeSisto got home that morning in 2001, she walked into a gruesome and terrifying scene.
At that point, it was just like a sense of trauma just came over me. I thought maybe the person was still there, and I kind of ran out hysterical. I dropped that phone and ended up getting to the car and calling from my cell phone, 911.
Ashley had been attacked just after taking a shower, stabbed 47 times. Her body was lying just outside the bathroom.
Had you ever seen anything like that before in your life?
I absolutely had not, and it still traumatizes me to this day.
Police arrived quickly and started asking questions.
Who could have done this?
It must have been one of the first questions that police asked you, though, was, was anybody angry with her? Did she have any enemies? It sounds like such a trite question, but you would think that based on what you saw, only someone who hated another person could do that.
Absolutely, yeah. And also it was a given from the get-go that it was obviously someone she was either familiar with or knew to let them in. Because as we had said, the house was kind of double gated.
You believe that Ashley let him in?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay, this is Pinehurst Road, and this is Ashley Ellerin's former residence.
Hollywood homicide detective Tom Small says there was little to go on. No blood splatter outside, no pieces of clothing, no material that would lead you to one particular individual.
No. We had teams of detectives searching the interior and the exterior. We walked the streets, we canvassed every building, door knocked every house.
Were you kind of baffled initially?
Very much so. You know, we were just looking for any type of direction or clues that would to lead to a suspect. So we had to start with the victim and work backwards, find out her associations.
They definitely wanted to talk to the person she was supposed to be on a date with that night.
How you doing? How you doing? Congratulations.
Actor Ashton Kutcher. And what role has he played in this as a witness in any way?
He is a person in a group of Ashley's friends. He's one of many, and he was a friend of hers.
Kutcher and Ashley had plans to go to dinner, but he was running late and kept pushing back his arrival. Kutcher told detectives that at 8:24 p.m. he spoke with Ashley, who told him she'd just gotten out of the shower. Ashton Kutcher didn't actually arrive at Ashley's front door until around 10:45 p.m., at which point, he says, he was confused because the lights were on, but no one answered. Just as he was about to leave, he glanced through a window and noticed what he thought was red wine spilled on the floor. Turns out, it wasn't wine. It was blood.
It just was a very bad scene. A lot of anger, a lot of rage. Somebody had isolated Ashley Ellerin to kill her and was very, very angry when he did it.
Could anyone think of someone who wanted to hurt Ashley?
Not really, almost to a person. Ashley was considered to be, you know, like the life of the party. She had a lot of friends from different walks of life, friends from school, her roommates, celebrity type folks.
Kutcher wasn't the only man police were interested in talking to. This is Mark Durbin, a not-so-famous actor who was also Ashley's property manager. Durbin and Ashley were secretly having a relationship, and he and Ashley had been intimate earlier that evening. But like Kutcher, he had fully cooperated with investigators, and both men were ruled out as possible suspects. While police had no concrete leads, Ashley's friends couldn't shake the feeling that the guy who seemed fixated on Ashley was involved.
In your initial conversation with police, did you mention Michael Gargiulo to them?
Yes. I didn't know his name, but the heating and air conditioning guy.
And did they pay any attention to that?
I know they took note. I don't think they took it very seriously or that much of a threat.
If he was not in their circle of friends, they were creeped out by him.
So when you hear that, does it strike a chord with you?
Well, I mean, it takes a little bit more than that to get focused on somebody as a suspect in a case like this.
Gargiulo wasn't really on Detective Small's radar. Ashley had a large social circle. There were hundreds of people to talk to, and he was just the creepy air conditioner guy. It would take months for police to learn his last name and put him on their list.
It weighed really heavy on me personally, because everybody has the case, and this one was mine. My frustration was, why can't I get the evidence I need to solve Ashley's murder?
Back in Cook County, just outside Chicago, Tricia Piccaccio's murder was unsolved for nearly 10 years. Her mother, Diane, was relentless, hounding investigators.
At least once or twice a week.
And did you feel like anything was being done in that time?
No, but I kept thinking maybe I just keep going and talking to them and keep telling them every little thing that came to mind. It was just...
It did help some of them.
It helped me probably emotionally, because it was almost like I could talk to them. They knew what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
I have the tenacity to keep going until it does happen.
You're not going to give up?
I'm not going to give up, no. My daughter is going to get the representation that she deserves.
Cook County Sheriff's Detective Lou Salo was assigned to the case in 1999.
We had the benefit of technology when we took the case over.
By 2002, new DNA technology allowed investigators to take a fresh look at the evidence collected from the crime scene.
We were hoping to establish some type of DNA profile, give us an idea of a possible offender.
So what's the first big test result you get back, the first new piece of information from this round of DNA testing?
Well, the biggest thing is when we got the unknown male contributor from the fingernails.
Male DNA found on Tricia's fingernails. Now they had to match it.
At that point, we began a DNA campaign of everybody, including the Piccaccio family, her friends of hers that were with her at the road rally that night. We even tested the dog.
You even tested the dog?
Yeah.
Detectives wanted samples from anyone they had talked to back in the day, and Michael Gargiulo was on their list. Detectives heard Gargiulo was now living in Los Angeles, so they went to the LAPD for help.
I had no knowledge they were even coming.
By now, Detective Small had begun to take a closer look at Michael Gargiulo.
And all of a sudden we get a phone call. Cook County's in town. He says, well, who is it you're looking for? And they named Michael Gargiulo.
You said, hey, that's my guy.
They showed up. I held up a photo. I said, is this who you're looking for? And they said, yeah. How do you know him? I said, well, right now he's a potential suspect in a murder investigation. What do you guys have?
Detective Small agreed to help Cook County find Gargiulo and collect a DNA sample. In 2002, almost 10 years after Tricia Piccaccio's murder, the LAPD caught up with Michael Gargiulo.
We obtained Mr. Gargiulo's DNA sample, and
And he was cooperative with that?
Not really, but it got done.
The DNA sample was sent to the Illinois State Police Crime Lab. The results were stunning. A match. It was Michael Gargiulo's DNA on Trisha's fingernails. Case closed? Not exactly.
Did you think it was enough to move forward?
Well, I thought it was, but I'm not the attorneys.
Cook County Detective Lou Sala.
It was explained to me, and the explanation made sense at the time, that they just wanted some type of corroborating evidence.
They needed something more than the DNA.
Something more than that.
Because, they said, Michael Gargiulo's DNA might have gotten on Trisha in a way that had nothing to do with the murder.
At the time, he was a friend of the family. You know, and one would have to wonder, could it have gotten there by casual contact?
And had there been casual contact in the hours before or the day before that she was murdered?
There was, the day before.
The day before her murder, Gargiulo was driving with another friend, Scott Olson, when they saw Trisha.
We drove past Picaccio's house, and who do we see rounding the corner, walking away from us? There's Trisha. Mike's driving, he kind of swerves over, slows down, swerves over, gets right behind her, and we saw she was crying. So she's like, hey, give me a ride. I'm like, whoa. Okay, sure, get in. So she gets in the car, said, take her to so-and-so's, take me to so-and-so's house. So we just drove her, we dropped her off, and that was it.
When we spoke to Jack Blakey from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office in 2011, he confirmed that because of that ride and because Gargiulo had spent time at the family home, he cannot be sure if Gargiulo's DNA on Trisha was from the attack.
The evidence just hasn't been there. I wish we could bring closure to her family tomorrow.
So with nothing else tying him to Trisha's or Ashley's death, Gargiulo was only a guy who had the bad luck of knowing two different women who had been murdered in exactly the same way. Gargiulo left Hollywood and continued doing what he always did, never staying in one place for too long.
How come nobody keeps tabs on this guy?
I don't know if they tried. My understanding was he kept kind of a low profile. I think he knew he was on the radar.
Over the next few years, Gargiulo had several girlfriends and even became a father. In 2005, he settled in suburban El Monte, 20 miles east of Hollywood. Then, just before Christmas that same year, in that same neighborhood, there was a murder. The victim was another attractive young woman.
We're talking about a 90-pound, 32-year-old woman who's defenseless, asleep in her bed in her home, where if there's any one place in the world she should feel most secure. That attack is every woman's nightmare.
Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department homicide detective Mark Lilyfield.
This is a building where the murder happened. Behind me in apartment number 20 is where Maria Bruno lived. She had 2-year-old twins, and then I believe a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old.
In the months before her death, Maria and her husband had several violent fights, including one where her husband punched her in the face. She left him and found an apartment in this gated complex.
She had picked that building specifically because it was very secure. You had to either have a passcode or a key to get through the front door, so it was a pretty secure building.
But someone got past that security.
The suspect entered through the kitchen. It appears from the evidence that he obtained a weapon there in the kitchen.
A knife?
Correct. Her body was somewhat mutilated, and you just, you know, that's crap you see in the movies. In real life, that is very rare. It just doesn't happen.
There was very little evidence left behind, except for one blue cotton bootie found in the courtyard outside Bruno's apartment.
Just about where we're standing is where that blue cotton bootie was at.
Right here?
Yeah, right here, right here. And it was kind of out of place. Actually, on the sole of the bootie was a drop of blood, and DNA testing proved that, in fact, it was Maria's blood.
Police immediately took a hard look at Bruno's estranged husband. There was the history of a turbulent relationship, and drops of Maria's blood were found in his car. But Maria's husband told police that earlier that evening, He and Maria had decided to rekindle their relationship. They went to a restaurant where the manager confirmed Maria had cut her finger and was bleeding as they left. And like Boccaccio, then Ellerin, and now Bruno, another vicious murder eventually turned into a cold case. As for Michael Gargiulo, his romantic life was once again in turmoil. He left his girlfriend and new baby in suburban LA and headed to the beach, Santa Monica. And once again, where Gargiulo went, an attack eventually followed.
A young woman is woken up by a man attacking her with a knife.
Santa Monica, April 28, 2008. Another break-in, another brutal assault. But this attack would change everything.
I got the call at about 12:30 in the morning from my sergeant and asked me to come out and respond to a scene of a stabbing or attempted murder.
Then Santa Monica Police Sergeant Richard Lewis.
He gained access into this window, which was open a few inches. And once he got inside there, he then opens the front door and kind of stages it as an escape route. Proceeds into the bedroom where she's sleeping, and what awakes her is a knife being plunged into her.
He just flat out stabbed her.
Right. She was stabbed multiple times in her chest and shoulder and right arm, and suffered several wounds to both of her hands as she's grabbing this knife as it's being plunged down upon her.
The victim was 26-year-old Michelle Murphy.
What can you tell us about her?
She's an incredible young lady, and just someone who's very resilient and decided to fight.
As Murphy, all of 5'1", was fighting for her life, the blade is slipping back and forth, and somewhere in the struggle, the attacker is also cut.
And at some point, there's a lull in the action, and she was able to get her feet up underneath and kick him off of her.
The attacker stumbles off the bed and out of the room. Bleeding profusely from her multiple stab wounds, Murphy runs after the hooded man down the hallway to the front door.
Did he say anything to her ever?
I'm sorry.
He said, "I'm sorry."
I'm sorry.
Then he ran out. Michelle immediately called her boyfriend, who called 911.
She told me that she woke up and there was someone on top of her and she forced them off and they ran out. Okay, we are on our way.
Then the police call Michelle.
Okay, what is your name?
It's very hard to hear her answers.
The fire department is already on the way and we're on our way. What does this person look like?
He definitely got me after like a long sleep, like chester kind of thing. Everything's a dark.
You don't know how big this guy was? How tall he was?
Maybe the most, I don't know, like 5'11" or something.
So he comes out this door and there's blood on the steps right outside the front door?
We have some blood on the steps.
Okay.
And then blood on the concrete steps here, leading out down this walkway and into the alley.
So how significant in your investigation and when you showed up that night did you think that blood was going to be?
Huge. Huge. About 25 days after submitting my samples to the crime lab, I'm informed by a criminalist where we actually have a hit, a DNA hit.
And who does it match?
Michael Gargiulo.
Conclusively?
Yes.
They were able to make the match because, remember, Gargiulo's DNA had been collected for DNA testing in the Boccaccio case and was already on file. And guess where Gargiulo lived at the time of the attack?
It'd be the second building down, and the first window would be just above that black trash can that you see on the left side.
He could see right into her bedroom?
If she were to have the blinds open, that'd be correct.
That's pretty scary.
Yes, absolutely.
Within 24 hours of making that DNA match, Gargiulo was arrested for the assault of Michelle Murphy.
He was taken into custody.
And what was his response?
His response was, "Which agency is this?"
What did that say to you?
That tells me a lot. It tells me that he wasn't sure of which crime he's getting charged for.
But that there was more than one out there.
To me, that's what that meant, yes.
Sergeant Lewis was reminded of a conversation he'd once had with Detective Lilyfield about a similar murder that had happened 3 years earlier in El Monte, just outside of Los Angeles.
I got a call from Sergeant Rich Lewis from the Santa Monica Police Department. He had a case that was very similar. Luckily, his victim survived, and he had identified a suspect.
And it turns out Gargiulo once lived close enough to Maria Bruno to also watch her. She reported to friends run-ins with the strange guy across the way.
So this is her apartment, and where was Gargiulo's apartment located?
If you turn around and look, it's right over your right shoulder. It's apartment number 34.
So that is up just behind that tree, correct?
Correct, just to the right of that tree. So you've got a clear view, obviously, from his apartment.
Now, the pieces of the puzzle were finally starting to come together. Determined investigators had discovered more evidence. Remember that blue booty found near Maria Bruno's front door? In Gargiulo's old apartment, just across the way.
And sure enough, in the attic of the apartment, we wound up finding a matching booty, a blue cotton booty, just like the same one that we had found at the crime scene, the same manufacturer, the same make, the same model of booty.
And in that 2001 murder of Ashley Ellerin, Gargiulo lived only a couple of blocks away. He was frequently seen hanging out with his dog at this park directly across the street from Ashley's home.
We had information that he's, frequented the dog park, parked his vehicle on occasion over there.
Within a month, Michael Gargiulo was also charged with the murders of Ashley Ellerin and Maria Bruno. When Tricia Picacchio's family heard that Mike Gargiulo had been arrested in LA, they were certain he would soon be charged with Tricia's murder. But nothing happened. Then, in 2011, 48 Hours ran our first show about the so-called Hollywood Ripper and the unsolved murder of Tricia Picacchio. Almost immediately after the show aired, a witness reached out to me.
I watched the show, and it was a mugshot of Mike.
Teamer Leary, one of Michael Gargiulo's bouncer buddies from Hollywood.
And did you reach out to Anthony?
I did. I sent him a text.
Yeah, he tried.
Did you know Mike's a serial killer?
Turns out both Teamer and Anthony DiLorenzo had led checkered lives of their own, in and out of jail. But both men were now fathers, and seeing Tricia's father on 48 Hours moved them.
I tried to revive her. That is the worst feeling in your life, when you can't do nothing for somebody you love.
I get emotional because I love my children. And when I look at him and I see that video to this day, I get a pain in my chest that any man would have to miss and love their child like that.
So you're watching it, and we're telling the story, and you have...
I already know.
You already know. You have pieces of the puzzle that we don't even know exist.
Yeah. I said I have to let somebody know what I know.
Here's what Teamer and Anthony knew. They said back in 2000, when they were all working together, Michael Gargiulo told them he had murdered a girl in Chicago.
We were cruising down Sunset. He asked us, but he's like, "You guys ever kill anybody?" And he's like, "I have." And we're like, "Shut up, shut up."
Here we go again.
He said he buried this. He was, "Yeah, I buried a bitch." He goes, "I left the bitch on the steps for dead."
We put them in touch with Chicago authorities, and soon Michael Gargiulo was indicted for the murder of Tricia Picacchio, 18 years after her death. Then Cook County State's Attorney Anita Alvarez.
There's new evidence that has just come forward after the 48-hour episode. Really, coupled with the DNA, we feel at this point that we have sufficient evidence.
But the Picacchios' search for justice was just beginning. There was a long road ahead, full of unexpected twists and turns.
Well, see, my truth is being 100% innocent, being wrongfully charged. All I could do is be calm. and fight for my innocence.
Up next.
I hate you, I hate you, I hate you.
The accused Hollywood Ripper faces trial.
This was somebody who was going to take pleasure in plunging a knife into their victim over and over and over again.
Celebrity Ashton Kutcher takes the stand. In a surprise, both the prosecution and the defense make him their star witness.
Ashton Kutcher talked about what would have been his first date with one of the murder victims.
The case will not be easy for the DA.
Zero trace evidence, no eyewitnesses, no fingerprints. Really, they had nothing.
And the defense says there may be other killers out there.
They just have to establish some reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury.
And offer a bizarre story.
Began a circular slicing motion.
Multiple personalities.
It was really a very strange spectacle.
And even possession.
If you are caught red-handed doing something, you can say, I was there, but I wasn't.
You don't want to think that a regular person, can actually commit this horrific of a crime and then just go live day to day. Who does that?
The case of the Hollywood Ripper is not over. Not by a long shot.
It's really, really sick.
This special two-part edition of 48 Hours will continue. This special two-part edition of 48 Hours continues.
He's accused of attacking at least 4 women.
He's been called a serial sexual thrill killer.
This is not a typical murder case. This is a systematic slaughtering of beautiful women by a serial killer.
4 young women, only 1 survivor.
The Hollywood Ripper is one of the most horrible cases I've ever seen. This is a man who spied on them, who stalked them, and then brutally stabbed them to death. And that's defendant Michael Gargiulo.
Ashley Ellerin, 2001.
Ashley Ellerin was supposed to go on a date with Ashton Kutcher. And he rang the doorbell and nobody answered. He saw what he thought was spilled wine all over the place. Unfortunately, we later learned that that was her blood.
Maria Bruno, 2005.
Mother of 4 was brutally murdered inside her El Monte apartment.
She was stabbed to death.
You think she was asleep when she was attacked?
I do.
Michelle Murphy, 2008. This attack would change everything.
How did Michelle Murphy somehow get away from this guy?
She fought. We have some blood on the steps.
Okay.
And then blood on the concrete steps here, leading out down this walkway and into the alley.
So how significant did you think that blood was going to be?
Huge. We actually have a hit, a DNA hit.
And who does it match?
Michael Gargiulo.
I'm Maureen Maher. Since the fall of 2008, I've been covering a man known as the Hollywood Ripper. It's a story that 48 Hours helped to break wide open. Trisha Piccaccio, 1993.
One question has haunted this quiet Glenview community. Who killed Trisha Piccaccio and why?
Who would do this? Why would anybody do this?
What was your reaction when you got a phone call that a witness had come forward to 48 hours?
I was shocked.
Would you have imagined that a television show would be able to help you solve a crime?
No, but it's never happened to me.
Targeted young women in Illinois and the LA area.
Frankly, it's almost a miracle that these cases were linked together. You say to yourself, who could do this?
Butchering his victim.
Attempted murder of a fourth.
You think, oh my God, it's a monster.
Vicious murders of 3 young women.
Murder and attempted murder.
In a town known for keeping secrets, the murder trial of Michael Gargiulo, nicknamed the Hollywood Ripper, could reveal a hidden life.
Tricia Pacaccio, Ashley Ellerin, Michelle Murphy, and Maria Bruno were all young, attractive, and outgoing.
On May 2nd, 2019, the case against Michael Gargiulo begins. Prosecutors say he murdered 3 women and attempted to murder a 4th.
He staked them out.
Mary Fulginiti, a former federal prosecutor and 48 Hours consultant.
He stalked them, and then he stabbed them brutally.
Prosecutor Dan Aikman says Michael Gargiulo is a serial killer, attacking 4 women just for the thrill of it from 1993 through his arrest in 2008.
What you will hear is that Michael Gargiulo, for almost 15 years, was watching, always watching. And his hobby was plotting the perfect opportunity to attack women with a knife in and around their homes.
During those years, Gargiulo played high school football, was a wannabe actor, and a repairman. It has taken Gargiulo longer to go to trial than any other inmate in the history of the LA County Jail. Nearly 11 years. This is how he looks now. There have been nearly 100 hearings. He's fired attorneys and even tried to represent himself.
Mr. Rubin and myself have the opportunity to ask questions and cross-examine him.
But now, with the new high-powered court-appointed legal team, the wait is over. The prosecution starts with its strongest case and most powerful witness.
Michelle Murphy, in 2008, was stabbed in her bed in her Santa Monica apartment, right across the alley from Gargiulo's apartment.
After showing photos from her brutal attack, Michelle Murphy, the only woman who survived this alleged serial killer, is called to the stand. There were no cameras allowed in court during Michelle's testimony, but we wanted to share with you some of what she said, her exact chilling words. I grabbed at the knife. I wrapped my hands around the blade. And at some point, 5'1" Michelle Murphy gets her legs up against her chest and shoves the attacker off of the bed. She describes how he runs out of the room, down the hallway. She goes after him, and Michelle says the attacker told her, I am sorry.
This is Ms. Murphy in the hospital.
Michelle never saw his face, but noticed he was left-handed. In the struggle, the attacker was also cut, leaving his blood, his DNA, all over her bedroom.
Gargiulo's blood and DNA were found on Michelle's bedspread and sheet and in the blood trail across the alley.
After Michelle Murphy testified, the prosecution turned to the other victims to prove Gargiulo's pattern of stalking and stabbing. 3 years before Michelle's attack, Maria Bruno, a mother of 4 young children, was stabbed 17 times.
Maria Bruno was stabbed to death in her El Monte residence.
Maria Bruno's body was discovered by her estranged husband, Irving, who called 911.
I'm looking at her right now. She's dead. She just barely moved here about less than a week ago.
Gargiulo lived right across the way.
Gargiulo entered Maria's apartment through a window, put on blue surgical booties, and mutilated Maria with a knife as she slept.
The prosecution argues that the pattern and direction of the blood drops show that the killer was left-handed, just like Michelle's attacker, and just like Michael Gargiulo. And this time, the killer left something behind, a blue booty with critical evidence.
Detectives located a blue surgical booty right outside of Maria's front door. Forensic analysis showed that there were drops of Maria's blood on the booty, and Gargiulo's DNA was around the elastic band.
4 years before Maria, there was Ashley Ellerin, a 22-year-old fashion student in Hollywood.
Gargiulo, who lived within a short distance from Ashley's house and frequented the dog park across from her house, injected himself into Ashley's life. On February 21st, 2001, within weeks of Gargiulo fixating on Ashley, surveilling her home at odd hours, Ashley Ellerin was found stabbed to death in the hallway just outside her bathroom. Ashley had been stabbed over 47 times.
As the state lays out its explanation of how Ashley was murdered, an important witness is about to have Hollywood's eyes upon him.
This is Mr. Kutcher. He's Ashley's friend.
Ashton Kutcher is used to being a star, but not a star witness.
Mr. Kutcher is part of the chronology of this case that is offered to show you that there was a very narrow window of opportunity for somebody to get into the house and murder Ashley.
Why is Kutcher called as a witness?
He's incredibly important to the timeline here and when the murder possibly occurred. And he may have been the last person to actually speak to her before she was killed.
At trial, only still cameras were allowed for his testimony. Kutcher is asked about his planned date with Ashley on February 21st, 2001, the evening she was murdered.
At 8:24 p.m., Ashley talked to Mr. Kutcher on the phone, and they confirmed a plan to go out that night.
Ashton Kutcher was running late, so he called Ashley again at 10:15 to let her know he was on the way. But Ashley didn't pick up. He then drove to her home, knocked on the door, but still got no answer.
He'll testify that at 10:45 p.m. he arrived at the residence and saw what he thought was spilled wine on the floor. We believe now the evidence will show that was actually blood, and Ashley had already been murdered.
A diagram of Ashley's home is shown.
That's her bathroom, where we believe she had just exited the shower and was getting ready to go out with Mr. Kutcher when she was attacked from behind. And then there was a struggle in the area right outside the bathroom where she was stabbed 47 times.
Kutcher testified that after learning about Ashley's murder, he, quote, went to the police. I was like, my fingerprints are on this door. Like, I was freaking out. Although never a suspect, Kutcher was concerned about what he left behind. That's unlike Michael Gargiulo, who was always careful to cover his tracks.
The methodical and systematic slaughter of women, that's what this case is about.
The prosecution painted a portrait of Michael Gargiulo throughout his life. He was violent towards women, interested in serial killer Ted Bundy, and studied forensic science.
Mike was a strange guy.
This is Mirko Hoffman, a man who now describes himself as Gargiulo's former best friend.
Told Mirko that he could get away with committing crimes because he studied forensics.
He would go online, whatever he could find about forensics, and he would learn from people's mistakes, other criminals' mistakes, you know, how to get away with a crime. And he told me if he ever got caught committing any crime, he would just lie until he dies. Lie until you die.
Michael Gargiulo felt confident, arrogant, dare I say, invulnerable.
Prosecutors said Gargiulo also studied a book that taught you how to kill with a knife.
The Anarchist Cookbook talks about knives, the perfect guide to committing some of these crimes, detailing how you go for the throat.
We believe the evidence will show as this is what Mr. Gargiulo was doing.
As for Gargiulo's motive, prosecutors described a serial killer with a sexual bent.
This was somebody who was going to take pleasure in plunging a knife into their victim over and over and over again.
To better understand that, we asked Chris Mohandi to explain. He's a forensic psychologist and expert on serial killers. He is also a consultant to 48 Hours.
Most serial killers are motivated by power. That's at the core of everything.
The prosecution points out that Gargiulo never raped his victims, but he controlled them, and say for Michael Gargiulo that control itself is a sexual thrill.
It's control over life and death, so violence has become sexualized.
According to prosecutors, Gargiulo went after women he found attractive.
Michael Gargiulo noticed Michelle Murphy. Michael Gargiulo noticed Ashley Ellery. Michael Gargiulo noticed Maria Bruno.
And he stalked them.
He watched and waited and collected real-time intelligence on the victims.
Prosecutors say the spying was all part of his power game and his pattern.
And you've got all this stalking, this watching, surveilling, and fantasizing going on, and the person is doing this repeatedly to try to satisfy their urges. At some point, for some of these individuals, it's not enough to just think about it anymore, and they have to move to the next step. They have to actually kill in order to get the same degree of stimulation.
To really make their point, prosecutors took the jury out of court to see where everything happened. Jurors saw that Michael Gargiulo lived close to all of his victims, close enough to watch them. To start with, Gargiulo lived right down the alley from Michelle Murphy. A few years earlier, he lived within a few 100 feet of Ashley Ellery. And when he lived in El Monte, his apartment was just across the courtyard from Maria Bruno. To strengthen their argument and really show how Gargiulo had a clear pattern, they also told jurors about a murder over 1,800 miles away.
You will hear that Gargiulo's killing spree started in Chicago in the summer of 1993, almost 26 years ago, when Gargiulo killed his first victim, his neighbor, then 18-year-old Tricia Pacaccio.
While Gargiulo is not being tried for Tricia's murder here in LA, prosecutors thought it was essential to tell the jury what happened all those years ago outside Chicago.
Well, it's introduced here for a very limited purpose, to show that the facts and the pattern in the Pacaccio case in Illinois are similar to the California cases.
It was 1993. Tricia Pacaccio was just 18 years old, coming home late one night in the Chicago suburbs.
Gargiulo, who was athletic and had trained in martial arts and boxing, grabbed Tricia, who was very petite, snapped her arm, and stabbed her repeatedly in the left breast, arm, and chest. Left her bleeding to death on the doorstep of the family home and fled.
I was the one who found her.
Tricia's father, Rick.
I woke up and I had a cup of coffee and I was going out to my van. And I just happened to see two little tennis shoes sticking up by the side door. And when I saw it was her, I dropped the coffee cup. I died right then and there.
At the time, Michael Gargiulo was a 17-year-old kid living around the corner, one of Trisha's brother's closest friends. When the murder happened, Gargiulo wasn't even a suspect, and the case went cold for years. By 2003, there was new DNA technology.
Eventually, Gargiulo's DNA was found on Trisha's fingernails.
Back then, prosecutors in Chicago did not think that DNA alone was enough to charge him, and the case stayed dormant. In 2011, 48 Hours reported on the case, and a witness came forward to me.
I watched the show.
Timur Leary and Anthony DiLorenzo had once worked with Michael Gargiulo as bouncers in the late 90s at a Hollywood nightclub. They say Michael Gargiulo confessed to them one day when they were driving, telling them that he had killed a girl in Illinois. At the time, it seemed too crazy to be true. Gargiulo had told them a lot of stories.
We're cruising down Sunset. He asked us, but he's like, "You guys ever kill anybody?" And we're like, he's like, "I have." And we're like, "Shut up, shut up."
Here we go again.
He said he buried this. He goes, "Yeah, I buried a bitch." He goes, "I left the bitch on the steps for dead."
We put them in touch with Chicago authorities, and shortly after, Gargiulo was charged with the murder of Trisha Piccaccio, 18 years after her death. Now, they are key witnesses at Gargiulo's Los Angeles trial.
In 1997, Gargiulo told his friend Timur Leary, quote, "I stabbed up the girl," end quote. Also in 1997, Mr. Gargiulo told his friend Anthony DiLorenzo, "I actually left the bitch on the step for dead," end quote.
They asked you to identify Gargiulo in the room. Did you make eye contact with Mike?
I did, absolutely. He did not want to look at me. He knew every word that came out of my mouth was true, and there's just no doubt about it.
Each of the Piccaccio family members were called to testify, retelling the awful details of finding Trisha on the doorstep of their home. They also described their relationship with her alleged killer.
What was it like for you to be in the room with him?
Oh, it's in the room. It's very, very hard.
Trisha's brother, Tommy.
It's difficult. I mean, something like that never goes away.
The Piccaccios can only hope that this trial will bring justice for Ashley, Maria, and Michelle. But the defense has another take. They point the finger in a different direction and away from Michael Gargiulo.
They just have to poke holes. They've got to raise any doubt. They're going to throw everything at it, the kitchen sink, and they're going to hope that some of that will resonate and it'll raise just a seed, a kernel of doubt in one of those jurors, and that's all they need.
Something accused serial killer Michael Gargiulo knows.
My truth is being 100% innocent, being wrongfully charged.
In recorded jail conversations with 48 Hours between 2009 and 2011, Gargiulo maintained his innocence and a desire to fight the charges.
It's a matter of waiting and knowing that there will be victory because I know I'm innocent, and it's just now putting it down. Yeah. Putting it down in the courtroom and just being patient.
In the courtroom, his defense attorney, Daniel Nardoni, has a plan. Argue someone else besides his client could have killed these women. He starts with the Ashley Ellerin case.
There's not one single witness called by the prosecution that saw Michael Gargiulo go into the house
In the Ellering case, despite all the efforts they put into scouring that crime scene, they came up with zero. Zero DNA, zero physical evidence linking him, zero trace evidence, no eyewitnesses, no fingerprints. Really, they had nothing.
Nardoni focuses on the prosecution's celebrity witness, Ashton Kutcher. To everyone's surprise, he says Kutcher is really the defense team's star witness, because Kutcher's account of that evening points to a very specific suspect, and it's not Michael Gargiulo. Instead, it's the manager of Ashley's rented house, this man, aspiring actor Mark Durbin.
I think there's suspicion that Mr. Durbin did this murder.
Mark Durbin testified he was actually having an affair with Ashley and admits they were intimate that very evening, just hours before Ashton arrived. The defense argues that at the time of her murder, Durbin was at Ashley's house. Their proof? Ashton Kutcher's cell phone records.
Ashton Kutcher calls her at 8:24 p.m. We know there's a phone record.
He calls her at 8:24 p.m. Miss Ellering stated, "I just got out of the shower."
Mark Durbin testifies that he was there when she was taking a shower.
And while he was there, he says Ashley got a phone call, then he left. Nardoni insists it must have been Kutcher's call at 8:24. And that is critical, because a neighbor testifies that around 8:25 or 8:30, he heard something.
He hears horrible screaming coming from Ashley's home.
He hears two screams from a woman.
That puts Mark Durbin possibly right in the thick of it at the time of the murder.
Mark Durbin was the only person known to have been with Ashley Ellering, last person while she was still alive.
But Los Angeles detectives cleared Durbin. He was cooperative, and they didn't believe he had a motive. Still, Nardoni may have succeeded in raising some doubt with the jury.
The defense makes a very big deal about Mark Durbin.
They did a pretty good job, I thought.
And with that, the defense was on to the other case where they saw an opportunity, the killing of Maria Bruno. Same argument, thin evidence.
Not one single person saw Mr. Gargiulo leaving the house.
But there was that blue booty with a drop of Maria's blood on it and Gargiulo's DNA on the elastic band. Nardoni reminds the jury Gargiulo, who lived across the courtyard, was a repairman.
We all know that Michael used booties all the time.
He says the booty probably dropped out of Gargiulo's pocket as he was returning from work and picked up a drop of Maria's blood that was already on the sidewalk. Maria's body had been mutilated, and again Nardoni offered up an alternate suspect. He pointed the finger at Maria's estranged husband, Irving.
The person that did this would to tell you, "I hate you, I hate you, I hate you." Whoever did this made it personal.
Nardoni paints a picture of a fractured marriage and details a previous fight between the two.
Irving Bruno grabbed his wife out of the car, threw her to the ground, and with a closed fist, punched her in the face.
He's got a terrible history of physically abusing her that came out. She said she was scared of him.
In fact, Maria Bruno had recently left him, but Irving told the police that on the night she was killed, he and Maria had rekindled their relationship.
Irving Bruno was the last person with Maria Bruno while she was still alive.
That night, he told police they went out to a restaurant together, returned to her place, were intimate, and then he left. A neighbor says she heard crying at around 1:30 in the morning.
And who's down there at 1:30 in the morning? You know who. Irving Bruno.
And police did find drops of Maria's blood in Irving's car.
They found it on Irving Bruno's baseball cap, a droplet. They found it on the passenger seat, and they found it on the center console.
But a restaurant manager testified he had seen Maria cut her finger earlier that night. Police cleared Irving Bruno. But the defense still tried to persuade the jury.
The defense, though, is still going to try to raise doubt. Just because they were cleared didn't mean they didn't possibly do it.
The defense also drills down on the Tricia Focaccio case, the 1993 murder outside Chicago. Everyone agrees it was Gargiulo's DNA on Tricia's fingernails. But how did it get there? Nardoni says it could have come from casual contact. Gargiulo had been friends with Tricia's brother, and Tricia had been in Gargiulo's van the day before she was killed.
I have a theory, and that is this, that Tricia sits in the back seat of the family van. You know, she touches it, her clothes pick it up, potentially Mr. Gargiulo's DNA.
To find out how likely that is, we asked Nathan Lentz, a forensic expert at John Jay College of Criminal Justice.
So what we're talking about now is a secondary transfer. A day later, I've never seen a secondary transfer that would last that long. There's just not enough cells that would survive. And especially on your arm, which is touching other things, you're putting on and off your clothes, that rubs off the cells pretty quickly.
And he says casual contact is even more unlikely because at trial, the scientist who matched Gargiulo's DNA to Tricia's fingernails said it was actually a 50-50 mixture of Tricia and Gargiulo's DNA. And that is significant.
Casual contact will leave a few cells here and there. A 50-50 mixture means, in almost all cases, that there was a lot of DNA, a lot of cells from both parties.
That would require contact.
That would require extensive contact. It looks to me that the defendant was scratched by those fingernails. That's what it looks like to me.
While there may have been some doubt about the power of that DNA evidence, no one disagrees that the DNA in the case of the woman who survived, Michelle Murphy, belongs to Michael Gargiulo.
DNA is all over the place. So they've got to somehow figure out, okay, what am I going to do now to defend this particular charge?
The defense's argument surprises everyone.
Michelle Murphy, because of her strength and courage, allowed investigators to work backwards and piece this entire case together.
Michelle Murphy is the sole surviving victim, and it is Gargiulo's DNA that is found all over Michelle's apartment. It's a problem defense attorneys Daniel Nardoni and Dale Rubin must address head-on.
And we know that the evidence in this is stronger. It is much stronger.
Michelle testified that she never saw her attacker's face, but did notice he was left-handed. And there were those words Michelle heard her attacker utter as he ran out the door. "I am sorry."
Michelle Murphy is the only count in which the prosecution has shown that Mr. Gargiulo was in her apartment and attacked her.
In a surprising move, Michael Gargiulo's attorneys do not deny that he attacked Michelle, but insist that he wasn't in his right mind when he did it.
She says that she's fighting off Mr. Gargiulo when all of a sudden he cuts himself. He stands up, he like comes out of a fog, says, I'm sorry, and runs out. Didn't know where he was, didn't know what he was doing.
And to prove it, the defense calls only 2 witnesses at trial, mental health experts.
Both of them have diagnosed Mr. Gargiulo with a mental disease or disorder. He can't premeditate. He can't deliberate. He can't have malice aforethought.
The defense says when Gargiulo attacked Michelle, it was as if another personality had taken over, as if he was possessed.
An experience of possession.
Michael Gargiulo, they claim, suffers from dissociative identity disorder.
Dissociative identity disorder used to be called multiple personality disorder. There's a split whereby they may not have an awareness of when they're doing certain things. This becomes the go-to defense because you can say, I was there, but I wasn't.
They're just saying that they didn't have the mental state to be able to commit horrible crimes.
And how often is that true?
Oh, it's very infrequently. I mean, the only times I've ever seen it actually be successful is when the person was truly like a schizophrenic, had other voices in his head.
The defense can only hope that they have managed to convince the jury. After a 3-month-long trial, 79 witnesses, the presentation of some 350 exhibits, and that field trip to the crime scenes, closing statements begin.
It was 4 female victims, all young, attractive, and outgoing.
Prosecutor Garrett Dameron again lays out the similarities among the victims and the attacks.
These attacks, these murders, took a great deal of strength and athleticism. Each of these attacks were all extraordinarily cold-blooded, torturous. Each of these victims were ambushed. No evidence that there was any theft. Knife is the weapon of choice.
20 similarities between the attacks of the 4 women are described.
Those common characteristics of these crimes point to one man, one killer, Michael Gargiulo.
Adding to their argument,
you know about the DNA,
is the forensic evidence, with Gargiulo's DNA found all over Michelle Murphy's apartment, on Trisha Piccaccio's fingernails, and that slight amount on that booty near Maria Bruno's home.
The prosecution is trying to lump these all together. Why? Because they want to show that it was one attacker, that the pattern, the practice, everything that was done was similar.
You have to judge each case separately.
On the other hand, the defense is trying to do just the opposite. They want to separate these out. They want to show that, no. One's in Illinois. Yes, you may have some in California, but they're separated by years in time. They're not just one attacker.
You can find them not guilty on all these crimes, or you can find them guilty of some crimes and not guilty of other crimes.
The defense just needs to plant a seed of doubt in one of those jurors.
The 3-month trial of Michael Gargiulo has captured the public's attention.
Alleged killer dubbed the Hollywood Ripper claims he's innocent.
He's accused of attacking at least 4 women.
For the families of the victims, the wait for justice has seemed endless. Finally, the finish seems to be in sight as the jury begins its deliberations on August 12th, 2019.
This was probably one of the worst cases. I've worked in this area for a long time as a prosecutor and defense attorney, and I've never seen anything this horrific. So for this jury to have to see all this evidence and day in and day out for 3 months, think about this case and what happened to these victims is really challenging.
But in what might seem like a short time, given such a long trial, after 3.5 days of deliberations, the verdicts are in.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Michael Gargiulo, guilty of the crime of attempted murder.
Guilty of attacking Michelle Murphy.
Guilty of the crime of first-degree murder.
Guilty of murdering Maria Bruno.
Guilty of the crime of first-degree murder.
And guilty of murdering Ashley Ellerin. Michael Gargiulo sat without emotion as he heard the verdicts. Outside the courtroom, I immediately called the Piccaccios with the news.
It's all done. It's all done here. And now it's your turn. She's sobbing that she's so grateful that they all got their justice and that now it's Trisha's turn.
Remember, Trisha's case was included in California only as supporting evidence of Michael Gargiulo's criminal pattern. It is up to Illinois officials in Cook County to try the case there.
We have to make sure that Cook County now does the job that they need to continue to do, because they need to prosecute him for what he did to my daughter.
Are you confident that he will be brought back to Chicago and he will stand trial?
Talking with the California attorneys and our attorneys in Cook County, I feel confident.
The Piccaccios are cautiously optimistic, as they say they have been let down by the Cook County State's Attorney's Office before. The family has criticized that office for being slow to charge Gargiulo when there was that DNA match in 2003. When we spoke with Jack Blakey from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office in 2011, he told us that DNA match alone wasn't enough to charge Gargiulo.
If there was a DNA match to Gargiulo, why hasn't he been arrested?
The DNA match is consistent with casual contact. We still cannot establish, based on the DNA alone, that he was present at the time of the killing, as opposed to a different time.
But it came out at the Los Angeles trial that an Illinois forensic scientist submitted her findings to Cook County prosecutors in 2003, that it was a 50-50 mixture of Tricia and Gargiulo's DNA on Tricia's fingernails. Remember, the expert from John Jay College of Criminal Justice told us that usually signifies extensive contact.
A 50-50 mixture means, in almost all cases, that there was a lot of DNA, a lot of cells from both parties. That would require extensive contact.
In almost all cases, extensive contact. So why not bring charges?
A lot of prosecutors are hesitant to bring a case when there's not at least one other piece of evidence that helps complete the picture of how the DNA got there.
Does it bother you that the charges weren't filed?
Oh, absolutely. We had them in 2003.
You had them?
It didn't work out.
For Lou Sala, the lead detective on the Piccaccio case, the focus now is seeking closure to the case that has haunted him through the latter part of his career and into retirement.
Now that LA is done, they fully intend to extradite him back here. And I think it has to be done for the Piccaccio family. Their verdict is still coming.
But the trial in LA did give the Piccaccios a chance to meet the men who changed the course of Tricia's case, Timur and Anthony, who came forward with Gargiulo's statements, evidence that pushed authorities to finally charge Gargiulo with Tricia's murder.
So you have both met the Piccaccios now?
Yes.
Yeah. What was that like?
It was hard. I see out of the corner of my eye, I see them, and I spun around, and I was like, Rick? And he instantly knew who I was. He hopped up and gave me a hug.
I feel for them so much.
Yeah.
That, you know, they were just sent through the ringer the whole time.
It's always painful.
Yeah.
It will always be. I just tell people it's something that I have to live with now and deal with now and try to cope with for the rest of my life.
Tricia's remembrance book from her funeral provides bittersweet memories.
And so there's family in here, obviously, and lots of friends. I mean, hundreds of people.
It's filled with kind comments about their beloved daughter, but also this.
Back here, what is that name?
Yeah, that's Michael Gargiulo signed that.
It has been a 26-year-long journey from when that book was signed by the man the Piccaccios now believe killed their daughter. Gargiulo is now a convicted murderer of 2 other women the Piccaccios, through Tricia, helped to find justice.
She helped these other girls. She was always liked to help people. And I just want justice to get done because that's what my daughter deserves.